The sky over western Germany was clear when the first distress flare bloomed against the pale winter light. Not bright, not urgent. Just a thin streak of smoke rising from a cockpit that should not still have been in the air. The American pilot, Lieutenant Robert Hayes, of the 357th Fighter Group, saw it as he banked his P-51 Mustang through a slow right turn. He had been escorting B-17 bombers on their return leg, scanning for stragglers, watching for any sign of enemy aircraft. But the Luftwaffe had been nearly absent that morning. The air war was ending. Fuel shortages, pilot shortages, the predictable silence of a collapsing system. What he saw now was different. A Messerschmitt Bf 109. Low, lurching, smoke trailing unevenly. Its canopy half open. Its wings rocking in an uncontrolled rhythm that experienced pilots recognized instantly. A pilot fighting his own aircraft. A pilot out of options. Hayes leveled his Mustang. He closed the distance slowly, not hunting, observing. The German plane drifted left, then right, as though pulled by two invisible hands. Through the canopy, Hayes saw the enemy pilot. Helmet, goggles, gloved hands, gripping the stick tightly. Then, Hayes saw the real problem. The landing gear had partially deployed one wheel down, one wheel jammed. A death sentence in midair. The German pilot fired another flare. Then another. Signal for surrender. Signal for mercy. Signal for anyone to understand that he was alive but losing the fight. Hayes checked the sky. No flak, no German fighters, no American bombers in immediate danger. Nothing requiring combat urgency. Just two aircraft alone over a fractured landscape. He positioned his Mustang off the Messerschmitt's left wing. Not too close, not too far. Just enough that the German pilot could see him clearly. Hayes raised his left hand from the throttle and pointed upward in instruction. Climb. Stabilize. The German shook his head. He pointed downward. His plane trembled violently. He mimed a motion parachute, jump, but then placed his hands back on the controls. He could not let go. Not even for a second. Hayes understood. If the German pilot bailed out, the plane would roll and kill him instantly. If he stayed in, the asymmetrical landing gear would drag the plane into a spin. He was trapped in a machine that no longer obeyed him. Hayes flew closer. Close enough to see the strain in the German's movements. Close enough to see a streak of frozen blood running from the pilot's forehead. Close enough to see fear, not dramatic fear, but the quiet, controlled kind, familiar to anyone who had flown combat missions long enough to understand probabilities. Hayes checked his fuel. Enough. Checked his altitude. Sufficient. Checked his spacing. Tight, but manageable. He gestured again. Follow me. The German hesitated, then nodded. They flew together, two enemies in formation toward a flat field south of the Rhine, one trying to stay aloft, the other trying to think of a way to keep him alive. Hayes knew the Mustang's stall speed. He knew the Messerschmitt's glide ratio. He knew the landing characteristics of both. None of the math favored survival. As they descended, the German pilot attempted to raise his landing gear. The damaged wheel refused. The cockpit shook. The Messerschmitt began to roll left. Hayes instinctively moved closer, stabilizing his own aircraft, to signal direction, angle, rhythm. The German fought back. Corrected. Held level again, barely. Below them, the ground approached slowly. A patchwork of fields. A narrow road. A frozen stream reflecting the pale sun. The kind of terrain where a skilled pilot might survive a crash landing if both wings stayed intact long enough. Hayes eased ahead. He lowered his own landing gear. He pointed again. Land here. The German raised one hand in acknowledgement. But the 109 dipped suddenly. A rupture of smoke burst from its engine cowling. Flames flickered along the exhaust ports. The propeller slowed, then wavered. then stopped. Engine seizure. The worst scenario. The German's aircraft was no longer flying. It was falling. Hayes pushed his Mustang to the edge of stall speed just to stay beside him. He shouted into his radio instinctively, though there was no one to hear. The Messerschmitt dropped to treetop level. The German pilot fought the glide, pulling the nose up, angling the dead aircraft toward a clearing ahead. Hayes pointed frantically. "Flare your lift! Flare! Flare!" The 109 hit the ground at a shallow angle, skidding across frozen earth, shedding metal in long, violent lines. The wing tore off. The tail snapped. The cockpit crumpled. The aircraft rolled to its side and slid to a stop beside a line of trees. Hayes circled overhead. Once, twice, 3 times. Then he saw it. Movement. The canopy pushed open. A figure crawling out. The German pilot was alive. Hayes exhaled so sharply his mask froze for a moment. He banked his Mustang in a low pass, tipping his wings in a gesture that pilots understood across languages and uniforms. The German pilot stood upright. He raised one arm in reply. The moment lasted 2 seconds. Then Hayes climbed, leveled, and turned toward his airfield. Combat rules did not permit landing behind lines. Fuel did not allow extended circling. Duty did not pause for individual fates. But the image stayed with him. A man he could have killed. A man he tried to save instead. The technical analysis came later, after Hayes completed his mission report. The mechanics studied the damage to the German aircraft cataloged by reconnaissance crews. They explained the gear failure. They explained the engine seizure. They explained the aerodynamics of a forced glide without power. All clinical. All precise. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, lighter than the P-51, faster in a dive, less stable at low speeds. Its Daimler-Benz DB 605 engine, prone to overheating under stress. Its narrow-track landing gear, vulnerable to asymmetrical deployment. Its cockpit layout, cramped and unforgiving. Its stall behavior, sudden and decisive. The P-51 Mustang long-range escort fighter, powered by the Packard-built Merlin engine. Laminar flow wing. High stability. Excellent low-speed control. A machine built not merely to fight, but to shepherd bombers home. Hayes understood both aircraft through experience, not theory. He knew what he had seen in the air. 2 machines built for war. One failing. One trying to compensate. 2 pilots locked in a problem that no manual could solve. The psychological dimension emerged slowly first in Hayes' own recollection, then in the historian's reconstruction years later. Combat pilots often described adrenaline, focus, distance. But beneath those patterns came another layer, recognition. The understanding that the man in the other cockpit was not abstract, not propaganda, not ideology. Just another pilot balancing math, physics, fear, and instinct. Hayes later said that the German pilot's movements were what persuaded him. Not the flare, not the surrender signal, but the way the man held the controls calm, deliberate, disciplined, the way he tried to correct even when correction seemed impossible. Any pilot, Hayes said, knows when another pilot is out of options. That was the shared language. Not words, not flags, actions, tiny corrections of flight surfaces, rhythms of control input, pressure, release, compensation. 2 men trained differently, raised differently, uniformed differently, but joined in the same battle with gravity, malfunction, and time. The strategic significance lay not in the event itself, one pilot trying to guide an enemy to safety, but in what it revealed about the air war's late stage. By 1945, the Luftwaffe was exhausted. Fuel shortages grounded squadrons. Replacement pilots received fewer hours of training than American pilots logged in a single month. Aircraft left factories with defects that could be fatal. Morale fractured under Allied bombardment. Meanwhile, American air power expanded. Engines, fuel, replacement parts, training programs, industrial rhythm, a system engineered for endurance. The imbalance shaped every encounter. German pilots fought like men measuring the end. American pilots fought like men assured of tomorrow. Hayes' act, unexpected, unrecorded in official doctrine, reflected this asymmetry. He had the fuel to assist, the time to circle, the altitude to spare, the confidence of a man representing a system still functioning at full speed. The German pilot had none of those things. He had a failing engine, a damaged landing gear, a battlefield shifting beneath him, a war collapsing around him. Yet both men still followed the same unwritten code. Respect for skill, respect for surrender, respect for the struggle to stay alive. In an era defined by total war, such moments felt out of place, yet they existed, scattered like quiet footnotes in a narrative dominated by destruction. The ending came years later, when historians traced records from crash sites and captured personnel lists. They identified the German pilot, 23 years old, 5 confirmed victories, wounded twice, shot down once before, survived the war, returned to civilian life, filed no report about the American who flew beside him, told no dramatic story, mentioned only that an American pilot did not fire when he could have, nothing more. Hayes never learned his name. The two men lived decades in separate worlds, one in California, one in Bavaria, never meeting, never exchanging a word, never knowing the other had survived. But their moment in the air endured through quiet testimony, witnessed by no one except themselves, recorded only in the memories of two men who once flew machines designed to destroy each other. The historian who reconstructed the encounter wrote one final line in his notes. Sometimes history is the sum of decisions no one was ordered to make. That was the truth beneath the mission reports, beneath the data, beneath the tactics and doctrine. One man tried to save another, not because of orders, not because of politics, because in the cold geometry of flight, he saw another pilot fighting the same laws of physics, the same margins of error, the same threat of gravity. And he chose to escort him not as enemy to enemy, but as pilot to pilot. The war ended. The machines were scrapped. The stories scattered. But the moment remained. 2 aircraft, 2 trajectories. One falling, one following. A decision made in midair. A quiet defiance of war's logic. A gesture without witnesses. History remembers battles. History remembers victories. But sometimes, history also remembers the brief moments when combatants looked past the war and saw each other clearly. And in that clarity, a Mustang flew beside a dying Messerschmitt not to finish it, but to guide it down. That was the story. That was the truth. A truth carried by 2 pilots, separated by nations but united by the sky. A truth that outlived the war.